Hello everybody, welcome back to The Pressing Matters. I'm Scott. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for your support. I am so glad to be back. During the time I was away, I only released 2 videos in the last month, but one of them was a doozy, and I didn't expect it at all. It was the first Living Stereo Popular video, and popular isn't the word for it. It took off like wildfire, and people were begging for another episode of the Living Stereo Popular series. So as soon as I got back, I started preparing to bring you this episode. I think one of the reasons that was picked up with such force by YouTube was the comment section was out of control. A lot of people were really into talking about these releases, and I was, of course, free on vacation. I was like talking to everybody and going back and forth, and I think that really hit the algorithm right, and they said, oh, there's a lot of interest in this, and it pushed it to so many people. So many people that hadn't seen my channel before subscribed, and they were very, very happy with this video. So I'm going to do a second one today. We're going to start with a gem, and actually a lot of these are gems. Can't get much more classic than this classic jacket. I love it. It just evokes the 50s so well. And when I found a beautiful copy of it, I was so happy. It is the music from Mr. Lucky by Henry Mancini. Hot off the heels of his success with Peter Gunn, he was besieged with offers to do more soundtrack work. And he accepted the offer to do the sound for this TV series. And although it's different from Peter Gunn, it's no less compelling. It is fun, urban, sophisticated music, really interesting orchestrations, of course, and wonderful melodies, as always. Mancini is great, and this is a wonderful example of his art. Highly recommend it. This is a great, great album. He followed this up with this. I had to put this in here. I usually like to do one from each artist, but in this case, Mr. Lucky Goes Latin takes some of the tunes from the first album, at least the first one, and gives it a very strong Latin beat. And it's so much fun. And the Hammond organ is so prominent that this is an easy recommendation. It's a lot of fun. Great dance rhythms through it. And it just gives another spin on this music, which is very, very good. There were Latin beats in this first album on a couple of tracks, but this just takes it to another level. Really, really a wonderful record. It's got to go in the gems category. There's no question about that. Next, I have a Belafonte record that not many people have heard or seen. It is called Swing That Hammer. It is a collection of Negro folk songs, of course. Belafonte was the supreme interpreter of this material, and most of us would not have heard these songs if it weren't for Harry Belafonte. He's with the Belafonte folk singers here, and this is chain gang songs, prison songs, and he brings them to life in a way that is just amazing. No one else could do a record like this. And this is a gem from the Living Stereo catalog. Absolutely. I have all of Belafonte's records, and I absolutely love that one. If you ever see it, please get that one. Looks like we have a little glare coming in here. Sorry about that. I'm surrounded in a halo here. Okay, next. This is Other Worlds, Other Sounds from Esquivel. We talked a little bit about Esquivel last time. If you were to get only one Esquivel record, I would suggest this. This embodies the whole space age bachelor pad music genre. Esquivel has the most unusual orchestrations, combinations of instruments, weird background vocals, extreme stereo effects. It's all here on this one. It's so much fun. This is the Audio Fidelity release. It was an Audiophile 180 gram pressing that came out a few years back. Of course, they're out of business now. This is no longer available. But when they were blowing these out at the end of the run, I got this for $14.99. I also have the original. The original's cover is much better than this. It's much lighter and you can see a lot more detail in it. Either one is recommended. It's the Esquivel album to own, with the possible exception of one, which is going to be in a different video. The Stereo Action series had a lot of interesting albums in it. I'm going to talk about this series in its own video, but Esquivel did one in that series called Latinesque, and that is up there with this one in a different way. I'll talk about that more in another video, but let's get on to this. This is a rare one. You very rarely see it. It's called The Dancing Beat of the Latin Bands, and it's a collection, a compilation of their top Latin artists, including Perez Prado, Xavier Cugat, which I pronounced correctly this time, Tito Puente, and Esquivel, and more. So if you want a little taste of the Latin sound of Living Stereo, you'll get it on that record. I've covered Chet Atkins a lot on this channel before. I did a complete overview of his work. In the overview, I mentioned this was my favorite Chet Atkins album of all time, and it still is. It is The Other Chet Atkins. I had to mention it in this in case you haven't seen that other video, but I do suggest you watch it. The Other Chet Atkins is a thematic album. It's Spanish tunes done in Chet Atkins style, and it's just beautiful. Really, really gorgeous album. Probably produced by Bill Porter. It doesn't say on the cover, but the way this usually worked was Chet would do an outline of his guitar parts. He would send them to Bill Porter. They would do the other instruments in the studio. Then it would come back, and he would do the final touches and final guitar work for the album. This is one of the best Chet Atkins Living Stereo albums. A delight to listen to from front to back. Really beautiful. Next is a record that I've talked about on the channel before. I thought I'd mention it again. Belafonte Sings the Blues. It was in my Records to Die For series, which means it is the very best of the best. I have a classic 4x45 set. I have 2 originals. There is also an Analog Productions version and more. This is a record you don't want to be without if you even think you like Belafonte and you like folk music. This is all about the art of singing. It's all about the voice. Very spare, beautiful arrangements, and the voice just comes to the fore. Really, really beautiful record. Highly recommended. Absolutely a gem. Next, I have an unusual one you don't see very often. It is by Belmonte. So not Belafonte, Belmonte, and his orchestra. You know, Living Stereo Popular had several Latin artists on their label. Tito Puente, Xavier Cugat, and more. So this was another Latin artist that they signed, and this is called Rumba for Moderns. Has one of the most interesting covers in the Living Stereo series, and it's recommended. It's a really good, interesting dance album. So very authentic sounding, actually. It's not really, it doesn't sound like it's watered down for American audiences. It's pretty authentic and one that you don't see very often. I don't know how much that goes for, but you should be able to find a copy for not much money. This is another Chet Atkins album I wanted to mention. I showed it in the Chet Atkins overview video, but it's called Workshop. It's one of the rarest ones, I guess. I remember seeing this selling for hundreds of dollars back in vinyl's heyday, and probably finding a really true near mint copy would cost you that. If you do ever see it, get it. It has the most attractive Living Stereo sound. Bill Porter produced this. Again, the way it worked was he would do the rough sketch, send it over to Bill Porter. The rest of the instruments would do the backing tracks, send it back to Chet. Chet would be in his studio here, finishing the track with the finished guitar tracks. There is a modern harmonic reissue of this. It is not the same thing, unfortunately. Seems like a mistake was made, and they pulled those early sketch tracks instead of the real guitar tracks to do that particular reissue, and it's not as good. This is the one you want if you're going to get that album. Okay, here's a weird one. You probably rarely see it. It's called Poe for Moderns, Interpretations of Edgar Allan Poe by Buddy Morrow and his orchestra. There's no narration or anything like that. Just, famous Edgar Allan Poe stories like Murders in the Rue Morgue, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Raven, and so forth, The Telltale Heart. Buddy Morrow and his orchestra do interpretations of those tunes. Now, if you heard these tunes alone and you didn't know what they were associated with, I don't think you'd have any idea that it was even related to Edgar Allan Poe, but it makes for a fun cover, for sure, and an interesting album. I don't know if I'd put it in gems, but I'm going to put it up there anyway. Here's one you don't see too often. It's Jesse Belvin. He was a vocalist that did a couple of albums before this, at least one. This is called Mr. Easy. Unfortunately, Jesse never lived to see this released. He had an accident early in his career, highway collision, and was killed and never got to continue his career. And in the liner notes of this, it talks about how he had finally really kind of came into his own and found his voice on this. And it's such a shame that he couldn't continue and grow as an artist. But what you hear in this album is very, very good. A really good way with phrasing, a bit of a jazzy approach. It's hard to compare him to anybody. I wouldn't compare him to Nat King Cole or Sam Cooke or anyone like that. He is pretty unique. And if you ever see this, it's recommended. I love this album. And I would like to find some of the earlier ones as well. We're getting down to the end. There's like 3 left. Here's an unusual one. It's a soundtrack to Jack the Ripper. I mean, when I saw this, I was like, oh man, this cover looks, wow. It's composed by Jimmy McHugh and Pete Rugolo. Pete Rugolo is a familiar name to me. I know him from his work on Mercury and other labels. This is dark, it's suspenseful, and pretty scary sounding at times. A really good album. This is fabulous. I love this record. If you ever see it, of course, get it. It's a good one. I've never seen the film, so I don't even know what it's like, but based on the music, I'm sure it's pretty scary. Belafonte is one of RCA's premier artists, of course. And you may have heard Belafonte at Carnegie Hall. I talked about that in its own video, talking about it as an audiophile classic. It was right around the time that he passed away. Most audiophiles have that record. And if you like that record, you will like this one. It is called Belafonte Returns to Carnegie Hall. Audiophiles know about it. It's been reissued by Classic Records, and I believe by Analog Productions as well. It's a little different this time around. He's got Odetta, Miriam Makeba, the Chad Mitchell Trio, and the Belafonte's folk singers. So a really good record, recorded live on the spot at Carnegie Hall, same as last time. I believe Bob Simpson did the recording. Let me see. Yes, Bob Simpson again. When you see Bob Simpson's name, you know you're going to have a great record. So this is a wonderful record. Each artist kind of has their own segment in it, and it's great. So I saved one for last that's so different from the rest. You don't see a lot of jazz in this series. And when I discovered this record, I was thrilled. It's a little different. It's called Paul Desmond Blue, a great saxophonist in a new setting. It's Paul Desmond with strings. And it's a beautiful, dreamy album with wonderful saxophone work by Paul Desmond. You may have heard of him before. He's famous for being in the Brubeck Quartet and playing on Time Out. So this is a really beautiful album, unusual for Living Stereo. This was also recorded at Webster Hall. And you know, I've told you, if you see something that's recorded at Webster Hall, it's probably going to sound great. It was a great venue. So that is it for this segment of the Living Stereo Popular series. If you would like to see another, I will be happy to do it. When I was going through my vault, I saw so many more that I would love to cover. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please engage in the comments. It was really fun last time, and I'm sure it's going to be just as fun this time. So until next time, I'm Scott for the Pressing Matters. Have a great day.